I'm going to jump in. This is the Adulting with ADHD podcast, self-empowerment for people with ADHD. Today, I'm very excited to have with me Elizabeth Brink. She is an ADHD coach and founder of Thriving Sister Coaching. How are you doing today,
I'm
Elizabeth?
good. It's so good to be here.
Me too. We met on Twitter and we've kind of chatted back and forth for a while, but this is the first time I'm actually talking to you, so that's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do as an ADHD coach and what kind of work you've been up to?
Yeah. So I thank you for having me.
Oh yeah.
I work with women who have ADHD. I work with a lot of moms, but not just moms. And I I really focus a lot on helping to kind of rebuild the narrative, retell the story of who they are so that they can then get a little bit smarter about what they really need or don't need in terms of structure or strategies or all of that stuff. So it's less about tips and tricks to survive this crazy world and more about learning more about yourself so that the decisions you make about what structures you put into place have a greater chance of being successful.
Awesome. And you have ADHD as well, is that right?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I was going to have you on today because you were going to tell us a little bit about your journey, especially within the context of hormones, which we've been talking a lot about lately on the show. And so I'm really excited to get into that. You mentioned you had early onset menopause. You want to tell me a little bit about that and how that played in with your ADHD?
Yeah. I'm in my early 40s
Hmm.
and early menopause is genetic in my family, but it's not like a guarantee that you'll end up with it. So I just like hit the jackpot, I guess. But I have two young kids, and before I had them, I had three miscarriages before I had my daughter, and we didn't really come to any conclusions on what was going on with that or why I was miscarrying. And then I had these two kids basically back to back, like 16 months apart, which I don't recommend unless you really need to be sure you have another one, which was kind of how I felt.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
after kind of the fog lifted and I was able to kind of sort myself out, I felt like super overwhelmed and something's wrong. I either have anxiety, I have depression, I don't know, maybe I just don't really like motherhood. Maybe just
Yeah.
spinning around how hard the adjustment was. And and in that also trying to kind of understand my ADHD in a new way. So I was diagnosed as a kid
Oh, okay.
and probably about a decade ago, a little longer, it kind of resurfaced in awareness for me. And so then entering into motherhood was like, I guess that next stage of like, oh, this is what this means. So
Right.
I'm like, overwhelmed. And then I get to this place where I'm feeling better about things and things are being managed a little bit better. And I have greater awareness around the overwhelm and the sensory sensitivity. And my husband and I were like, let's go ahead and try to have one more. So I'm one of five. My husband's one of four. And I think for me, I just felt um, like a whole family is a lot of kids.
You're right.
Even
Yeah.
though I also had this like deep sense that a lot of kids would be potentially disastrous for me because of my anxiety and my ADHD.
Yeah.
So we decided, let's just go for it. So we started to try, and then the pandemic hit. And it was like, you know what? Let's just not right now, let's not bring another life into this
Yeah.
craziness. Um, and so basically I had been on birth control. I stopped birth control. And then it was like, okay, well, where's my cycle? Hmm. Okay, where's my cycle? It takes a while for your cycle when
Yeah.
you've been on birth control.
Yeah.
So I'm just like chalking it up to this is normal. Like, okay, oh, this happens to some people who have IUDs. They end up with no period for a long time. Okay, maybe that's me. So anyway, I
Yeah.
had I had a period in May, and then because I have ADD, I wasn't keeping track. I didn't remember when I had my last cycle. And
Right.
so it had been several months, and I was texting with my sisters and was like, "Yeah, I don't know when the last time is I had when was that?" And I start looking through the calendar and I find the date, and my one of my sisters was like, "Okay, my doctor really doesn't like me to go more than 4 months without a period."
Good to know.
And so I was like, "Oh, I guess I should call my doctor." So I called, and they were like, "Okay, well, let's just like let's like get you to start your period." So they give you progesterone and they try to do, a quick start of your period.
Like
And
starting an engine, right?
yeah, like I can't even remember what it's called. It has some name that they call this like challenge that they do for your
Oh
body,
my gosh.
some kind of challenge. So the progesterone trial, I don't know. So basically it's supposed to mimic that part of the cycle that helps you to start your period. And so I took this progesterone and I was supposed to start my period within like 10 days
Yeah.
and it did not start. And so I got blood work done and yeah, my doctor called me and was like, "Well, it looks like you're in menopause." Now, the technical the technical barrier for saying it's menopause is 1 year without a period.
Okay.
However, because of my family history, knowing that several of the women in my family, went through menopause actually at 41, which is how old I was at the time,
Mhm.
and because of my counts from my blood work, my and the fact that I hadn't had a period in a while,
Right.
my doctor felt confident saying, "Yeah, I think that's what's happening here." So, that's, like, a very long story, but that's
No.
kinda how it happened, and it was just last year that I was like, "Oh, okay, so hi, I am now, like, in full menopause,"
In
and
a pandemic.
just like yeah.
Hello. That is incredible. I mean, when you think of all the challenges we're dealing with right now, and then all of a sudden, basically your entire hormonal makeup just completely shifted. Wow. So what did that mean for ADHD when that happened? How did that impact your symptoms?
So last summer, I actually went to see a new psychiatrist. Well, I didn't go anywhere. I was online, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I started seeing a new psychiatrist who really understands ADHD and he's actually been
Yay.
very helpful.
Awesome.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. He also has a very holistic view on psychiatry, which has been so refreshing
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
I feel like I found him serendipitously. It was not that
Intentional.
calculated. But anyway, I started seeing him last summer because I just felt like my ADHD is well managed. I mean, whatever, I still have ADD like everybody else who has it, but I'm managing and I felt like I was managing it okay, but I was still dealing with a lot of like anxiousness and worrying and I wasn't feeling like I could manage some of my overwhelm. And it was at certain times of the day, it was like end of the day kind of stuff. So I'm like, is this because my medication's wearing off? Is this because something else is going on? So I was seeing this psychiatrist and he started treating me for anxiety. And in getting onto that medication, it was right at the same time that I was starting to like figure out like, uh-oh, I haven't had a period in a while. So all this kind of happened at the same time where I was feeling like the only way I can describe it is I was feeling very disconnected from the people around me, and I was feeling very distant, mentally. So, emotionally too, but also mentally, and I was feeling very on edge and worried about stuff, but also just this, like, almost like an apathy toward, like, my very young kids and my husband, and just feeling very much like I would like you all to leave me alone and let me just be in my room doing whatever I wanna do for however long, which is also a mom thing. So, again, I'm like, maybe
Yes.
this is normal, like, all moms of young kids are like, "Please lock me in a room alone." I'm like,
Absolutely.
my husband had to be quarantined for COVID at one point for exposure, and I was like, what is so unfair? Like, I would love to be isolated for 14 days with people bringing me food. But anyway,
Yeah,
so all
for
of it was
sure.
happening at the same time, and I wasn't sure what was hormones, what was mental health, what was ADHD, like where all this stuff. So he at the time said, okay, well, let me know what comes out of this blood work and this exploration around the anxiety stuff. So that was helpful that he was really interested in
Yeah.
the connection there. And, he talked to me about the importance of hormones in managing mental health for women. And so
Wow.
as I was managing the anxiety around the end of the year, when I finally learned, like, okay, this is what's happening with me, it was actually my psychiatrist who really said, I really think that you should consider hormone therapy. My OBGYN had mentioned it, um, and she had said, if you want to do it, let us know and we'll get you a prescription. But he was talking to me about the prevalence of like very serious depression and actually like suicidal ideation in women around these large hormonal events, which we also know affects our ADHD.
Yeah.
So that thinking about that and having him say, he basically said to me, there's only so much we can do to support your mental health. If your hormones are that off,
Right.
you're not going to get to this place that you are envisioning getting to. And most women who go through menopause in their early 50s or maybe later or a little earlier, their kids are not usually this young.
Oh, yeah.
And so for me, I felt like having him say that, like, this could actually be a really important piece of the puzzle for your like overall mental health and well-being really opened my eyes. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try this and see if it is a piece of the puzzle for me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I can't even remember what question you asked because I have ADD and
That
I'm rambling, but
Well, that's exactly what I was asking. And while you were speaking, it made me think about. I mean, there's several reasons why we don't know enough about this, but it made me think that the women this has been happening to, they probably were, dealing with either older kids or they were empty nesters or whatnot. So it was even harder to, pick up on, maybe, retired, whatnot. And so people like you and me, I think we're about the same age. I just turned 40 or 41.
Mhm,
41. Yeah. So, it makes me think we're both still working, still very active professionals of young children. We're not going anywhere in 10 years, 20 years. So while you were talking, I'm like, wow, this is a whole wave of women that are going to really get hit with this.
mhm.
So that's incredible that your psych is on top of it. And
Yeah, and there is a lot to say about, like, women around menopause with ADHD get diagnosis because they are suddenly dealing with, a lot more brain fog, a lot more memory challenges and fatigue, and all those things that, estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, all those good
yeah,
things that keep us, keep the train on the tracks,
yeah,
starts to affect them. But for women with ADHD, if it's undiagnosed, it can feel like, really serious mental health stuff is coming up for them.
right.
And it
Yeah,
can also affect your mental health in that sense too. So yeah, I mean, I think, and that's partly why I also mentioned the miscarriages and the fertility stuff, because
yeah.
I think in hindsight, I now wonder if I was just perimenopausal early and didn't know
Oh,
it, and that's why I was miscarrying. I mean,
interesting.
we'll never know, but
Right.
it would make sense. And in that sense, it's like, wow, my kids are a miracle that they're here and that there's more than
Yeah,
one of them. Yeah.
yeah. There's so much mystery surrounding it. I'm reading a book right now. This is Your Brain on Birth Control by Dr. Sarah Hill. And in it, it's like she's getting into the background of how birth control came to be and the research and everything. But the focus has historically been on just getting us not pregnant. But there isn't a lot of research in all these nuances that you're talking about, like
Yeah.
perimenopause, miscarriages, emotional, mental well-being. And so it's really interesting I love talking to individuals and getting their personal stories because it's almost like this is this is like one of the few ways we have of getting data at this point. I mean, it's just
Yeah, it's like this is the research. It's
yeah,
interesting because it's why I
yeah.
love that you have been focusing on this so much, because most women don't know anything about their bodies
I
and,
did.
don't ever learn how to track their cycles to notice their moods and their feelings in their bodies and their energy and all of those things. It's like we should be learning this in elementary school when we learn about pads and tampons. We should be learning that our cycle and our hormones affect our mood and our energy and all of these things. I have had more than one client who have come to me and said, I want to work on this. I'm so inconsistent. I need to be more consistent. And I'll okay, let's like talk about that. What do you mean when you say consistent? Well, I'll have these like handful of days or a week or so where I'm just like on top of everything. I'm doing everything. And then it's like, oh, a week or two, like every month that where I just like can't do anything. And I'm sitting there like every month, is it this same cycle? And it's like, yeah, okay, well, does it does it correlate to your cycle at all? Because I don't know what they're talking about, right? But it's like
Right.
sometimes when they describe it, it almost could sound bipolar, right? And
Yes.
so it's like, but
Yeah.
it could actually be your hormonal cycle in
Mhm.
addition to ADHD and maybe some anxiety and depression or other stuff too.
Yeah.
And
Right.
having that awareness that, oh, every month I have some high energy days and I'm going to have a stretch of low energy. And how can I start designing my life around my energy cycles
Yeah.
instead of feeling like I should be whatever consistent means producing around the clock every month all year long? Like that's not how women's bodies work.
That makes me want to completely overhaul my schedule just talking to you. Like, because I was
Do
just
it.
thinking, I'm on the cusp of my cycle starting, and I mean the last 2 weeks have been hell. I mean, obviously you have other factors coming in, so it's always something else, right? It's always, well, I'm a new mom. Oh, there was a storm. Oh, someone died. Whatever, you know. But you're right. I mean, when you do the math, and I never tracked either ADD, and now I do, and it's like, holy moly, it changes so much just knowing. So when you talk about hormone therapy, are you referring to taking birth control as supplementation, or how are they helping you in terms of hormones?
So I take oral progesterone and I have an estrogen patch that is like once a week I change it. Um, within about 10 days of starting, I I don't want to be like it was this like, savior
Time
experience, but
party.
I felt very different. I felt so different that I could not believe that my hormones were affecting me as much as they were. I just had no idea. And it wasn't like it was the fix, but it definitely was a really crucial piece of the puzzle. And yeah, I mean, within a week or so, I started feeling like more affection toward my husband. I felt like my eyes weren't so dry. So there's this stuff around menopause women don't know that happens, which is that we just dry up, like everything dries up, our ovaries.
Oh my
And so
god,
I
you're
was like having
basically trying
dry eye. I was having all these issues that I just thought were
your
like
skin, right?
stress.
Your skin dry out too?
Yeah.
Oh
So
my
I'm
god.
just like thinking it's all this stuff that and I'm already kind of dry in general,
Yeah.
my skin and stuff. So it was like, okay, we got welcome to aging, more aging, but
Yeah.
learning the role of our hormones. And the thing is, I'm also not like pushing hormone therapy. My case for it for me personally was my kids are still really young. And I also have like a decade on my peers of I'm going to miss out on perimenopause where you do still have a reasonable amount of estrogen production. It's just inconsistent and it kind of ebbs and flows, which is what, contributes to a lot of symptoms of perimenopause. So my doctor was like, if you're willing to do it, I don't have risks that would make it like, and there was some research that was released a long time ago about hormone therapy that actually like was not right and it freaked a bunch of people out. And so understanding like it's actually a smaller dose than birth control. It's like such a tiny dose and it has such a big impact on, how I feel and how my body is functioning. And so it's definitely been the right decision for me for now.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's almost reminds me of what it was like taking mental health meds for the first time. Like,
Mhm.
it's incredible that hormones could be that. I know when I was coming of age and I would hear hormones, it would just be like, womp, 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 womp. Like, this isn't me. I don't care. Very like me focused, right?
Mhm.
Um, until it happens to you. And then you're
Yeah.
like, oh, wow, this is serious.
Well, and now I'm like every woman that I know who is over the age of 35, it's like be on the lookout. If your period is starting to be a little bit inconsistent and it's usually, like clockwork, or if you, which you may not know if you have ADD, um, or if you are starting to experience like some mood changes that feel like more severe, more out of character for you, it's worth talking to your doctors about, because it's not that you're going to take hormone therapy if you
Yeah.
unless you're in menopause, you're not going to take that. But it's really important that you know that that's what's happening, because perimenopause can last like 5 to 10 years, and it can be for some women really physically grueling, and for others annoying, and for others, hardly noticeable. And so it's just one of those things, again, like tune into your body, tune into your mood, pay attention, because it might not just be your ADHD. And it also you might not have anxiety or depression necessarily. Like you might also just be riding the wave of your hormones, and they affect everything.
Yes. I totally relate to that. And I recently switched psychs and telling her about my anxiety and whatnot. And I thought she was going to give me some sort of anxiety or depression based solution. And we ended up tweaking my stimulants instead. It wasn't an anxiety issue, it was an ADHD issue, which
Hmm.
is directly correlated with hormone fluctuations. So it makes total sense. So I just, I just, oh my God, I hope more doctors start talking about this. And I guess it's going to have to start with us, whether or not that's fair. I
It does have to start with us. And, I actually talked to a doctor, not to treat me, but as another woman who has ADHD. And she was a late diagnosis as an adult. She's a doctor. She's doing research on things related to like female reproduction. And she was telling me in this conversation that she got a late diagnosis. She's taking medication for her ADHD, stimulant medication, and she actually called the pharmacy to ask them if she had gotten a bad batch of meds because they were not working.
You're worthless to her.
But it
Wow.
was like during her luteal phase. It was like right before her period.
Right.
And so she said to me, like, I just really think there's something here. And I was like, yes, there is. Please listen.
Oh,
But
she's a
like she's a doctor who's like researching some of this stuff and
wow.
also has ADHD, right? So it's like that
Oh,
understanding of how all of this
yeah.
interplays
Yeah.
is still not on people's radar.
Right. Right.
And it can be on ours. It can be on ours. And we can say, you know what? That week of the month, I can see it's coming, and we're going to order out, and I am not going to push myself to have plans in the evening, and I'm
Yeah.
going to, eat candy if I want to, or whatever. Like I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to let myself be low energy because that's what my body needs.
Yeah. And I'm going to just say right now, I'm going to normalize that because that's exactly what I did today. And I was pushing through. I was really, really beating myself up all week. And finally, it always happens. All of a sudden, you're snapping at your kids and your husband, and you're like, I'm a monster. And then you realize, oh, I need to take a minute, you know?
Mhm.
And that's what I've been doing all day, all the things you described above. And
I
so,
love it. I love it. Well, it's like I used to have like a day where I would just have a meltdown. I would just like cry really hard about nothing, right? And then the next day I'd start my period. And so it's like when we can start to tune in and notice those things, we can help the people around us also adjust and care for us. But the other side of that coin is that you can also harness the energy and the power of those high estrogen days when you start noticing, I have these days where I feel like I'm,
on
on a
fire.
cloud. Like, great. Like, start tracking and noticing that. And then plan to do hard stuff on those days. Plan to reorganize the closet or get that PowerPoint drafted for work or whatever.
Yeah, or I'm just thinking to myself out loud, like batching a lot of work that I know for me, I do a few writing assignments for people, and I'm thinking out loud right now, but it's like I could batch write the first half of the month, take the second half of the month off of writing. So, wow, you just unlocked a whole box of possibilities just talking to
Oh,
me.
yay! I love that.
It's awesome. So yeah, I think I was going through my questions. You pretty much nailed all my questions. If anybody wants to seek you out, how can they find you out and about, and if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and Twitter. On Instagram, I am at Coach Elizabeth Brink, and on Twitter, I am ADHD Mama Coach because my name is too long. But so you can find me on either of those. I do coach women one-on-one, but I also hang out and coach in a group setting in the ADHD Enclave, which is an online community of women with ADHD that I help run with Liz Lewis, who researches and writes about
Amazing,
ADHD.
Liz Lewis. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful community of women. It's safe and private, and so you can come hang out with me like right away if you want.
Yeah, you guys could show up and talk about your period all you want and
Yes.
company, and you can get feedback from other people, and that sounds like a really great situation. I know I if I needed to, that would be nice to have. So,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for all the work you do for the women out there and for all of us on Twitter. You're so supportive, and thank you for being on the show. No.
Thanks for having me. This was wonderful, and we need to talk more about it. So I'm
Yeah,
so glad you're doing this. Thank
let's
you.
just keep talking. And if anything else ever comes up, anything interesting you're noticing among clients, whatever, we could get back on here again and just keep talking because
Okay, great.
nothing's going to change unless we keep talking. So,
That's right. That's right. Keep
all right.
talking.
Well,
Yeah.
take care. It was good to
Thank
meet you.
you. Thanks, Sarah. You too.
All right. Bye.